Well, there's also the argument, and I bring this up to Patrick a lot, if everybody is spelling it wrong, but they're spelling it the same, who's really right and who's really wrong?
It's like Mandela syndrome, you
right?
know, like really right.
I don't know, it's one of those, if someone calls you a horse once, you punch him in the face. You calls you a horse the second time, you punch him in the face. Third time, think about getting yourself a saddle, you know?
Right.
It's like less effort to get a saddle than punching people.
I'm going to keep that in.
You should.
The reaction was
we doing a
good.
clap sync now, or we don't need to anymore?
Actually, we don't have to
I'm
anymore.
going to miss it. Let's do it anyway.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Well, welcome to this week's podcast, Cost of Goods Told. We are joined this week by a very special power couple. We'll try and keep it clean. I won't let your heads blow up too much. But Patrick and Aaron Feges of Feges BBQ here in Greenway Plaza. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. I know you guys are busy. You got a little one in daycare in the building.
Mm-hmm.
You had a full day of work. You probably have more prep to do for tomorrow, I'm assuming.
No, I believe we're done for the day.
Oh, man, early.
No, we have work to do.
So the boss speaks. We do have work to
Out of
do.
the kitchen work.
Yeah, out of the
I
kitchen.
guess.
We're starting to think beyond Greenway.
Oh,
And
right.
so
Very
we-
nice.
Yeah, that's our homework. We go home from work
So there's
and we have homework.
there's the manual labor here, and then there's the whiteboard work when you get home.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
How do we make this grow and thrive and
Yeah.
good?
And we're only able to do our homework if Wyatt is sleeping. So we have to be really strategic about go home, give him a bottle, wrap him up, plug him with a pacifier, cross your fingers. Okay, maybe we can get some work done.
Well, I know we're jumping ahead, but I just saw him wrapped up in an Astros blanket and sort of glaring over at the TV out of his peripheral vision. And he's an Astros fan already.
Oh, yeah, we were watching the game last night.
Excellent.
yesterday,
It's
yeah.
unclear if he can even see the TV that far away, but Patrick has jumped to the conclusion that he is going to be Alex Bregman and will get a $25 million contract.
I love it.
And will take care of his parents. We're hoping that actually is true.
I think I started out that way too. Good for
That's
you.
my retirement plan.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Well, I'm training mine for the Rockets, so we'll have,
There we go.
Similar goals.
exactly, yeah. Hashtag, I want to inherit my money from my kids, you know?
Is there any easier way? I mean, it's not going to come from the government, so you might as well get it from your kids,
I
right?
know, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot to cover here, and for listeners who are relatively new to our channel, we like to cover a lot, but there is a lot to cover with you. There's the military background, there's your culinary career, there's your current establishment, and like we were talking about, now looking forward to a second establishment. Part of that too, that is something that we like to discuss with our guests, so our listeners kind of know, is like the family dynamics as well. As a family business, it's going to be awesome to kind of get both of you on this to kind of let the listeners know what to expect if they ever want to get into something like this. But if you both could just give us just a quick kind of recap. I know it's quite a bit with the military background, and there's a podcast out there that you talk a lot about, especially about your injury and so forth. And I think listeners should definitely need to hear that. And then also, I'm going to speak for Darren and I. Thank you for your service, for sure.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind, just, whatever you want to cover, and we can deep dive into it, and we can let it run longer, whatever you're comfortable with. So.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll just start in the beginning.
There you go. We'll
It's
take
always a good
that.
place to start.
Right, yeah. I joined the Army out of high school 2003. I signed up for the delayed entry program. So I was already planning on going to the military when we invaded Iraq. We had already invaded Afghanistan. So I go in, do basic training. I end up in South Korea, Camp Hovey area, so out by the DMZ, which is real fun. You have curfews, and once a month you have a drill where you're pretend that North Korea is attacking you, and everyone kind of drags their ass out of bed at 3 a.m. and, really kind of half-asses it. But it was cold, too. I've never been that cold in my life.
Really?
Yeah, my first day in North Korea at the base was Christmas Eve. The Army wouldn't give me 2 more days of leave to stay home and enjoy Christmas.
Inflexible.
Yeah, so what are you going to do? But, I mean, it's a peninsula, and it's just cold. I mean, if you've seen any of the war documentaries about the Korean War, it's just those guys froze. And even with all our high-tech winter gear, I still froze my ass off. I slipped and fell on the ice so many times because I was born and raised in Houston. I don't know anything about that. But, so I was supposed to stay there for 2 years. We wake up one morning and we see on CNN scroller that 2nd Infantry Division from South Korea is being deployed to Iraq.
And that was yours.
That was us. And so then I called my mom, and she's like, "Oh, that's you guys?" Like, so she saw it. And then 3 days later, we actually got the orders. So I like to joke around. My mom found out I was going to war before I did. It shows you how the communication works in the military.
Yeah, up, not down, right?
Yeah, right. So, we spent a couple of months training during monsoon season, which is basically summer here, but just more rain. Every day it rains. And then August of 2004 is when we flew over to Kuwait. Spent about a month training in Kuwait. We got a bunch of new, high-tech, cool, military gear. New helmets, new this, new vests, all that stuff. Still run around the desert in green vests,
Nice and cool.
Yeah, desert camouflage,
Lightweight
uniform,
too, right?
but you had the green, the green bulletproof vest, so they had a target to shoot at that stuck out.
You can laugh now.
Yeah, now. No, we
Yeah,
laughed in because it was, I mean, we rolled into Iraq with, we were in, our unit had been in Korea for years. So it was all soft top Humvees and all that stuff. I remember I had sandbags on the bottom of my truck and behind me blocking the window in case there's a blast, because this was year 2 of Iraq. We're just figuring out what IEDs are. We had never seen anything like that before, so it was kind of interesting. We were just piecing stuff together.
So as a kid coming right out of high school, right?
Yeah.
Were you even thinking about that? I mean, were you? I know you were preparing yourself to go to an unknown place.
Yeah.
To a place that you're uncomfortable with, probably hadn't been there. You may have read or tried to research. But sandbags at your feet, and then something behind you in a soft top Humvee. Were you thinking about that at all?
Yeah. No one expects it to be that much of a shit show. Because I knew going to Iraq was a possibility. We were at war, or Afghanistan, and this is still early on, and everyone's rah about it,
Sure.
And obviously Afghanistan we can get into politics about it, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Right.
But yeah, no, we had no idea it was gonna be a shit show like that.
Yeah.
Like my truck kept breaking down. It was a 3-day convoy into Ramadi, Iraq, where we were stationed, and my truck kept breaking down. I kept overheating in August in the desert. It's like 120 degrees out. But it's just the whole military's like that. It's stuff's broken down. You're never at 100%. Like everything's working.
Yeah.
So you just make do with what you have and
Sure.
figure it out. So actually, what we did, we ripped the thermostat out. So just the coolant just kept flowing.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so then it never overheated after that. So you just make it work, the sandbags you can joke about it, but it's like we just dealt with it.
Yeah, but when I hear you say things like we found a way, we found a workaround,
Yeah.
and then we just made it work. You know what I think of immediately? That time a piece of equipment broke down in your restaurant.
Which
piece?
time?
Which piece?
Well, a major one that smoked all kinds of meat.
Yeah, when the smoker.
The smoker twice.
But you figured it out within a very short period of time.
Yeah, you
and
just
I'm not
make it
jumping
work.
forward, and I'm not trying to make light of it. But
Yeah.
that training, good, bad, and different, has helped shape you for barbecue life.
Yeah, nothing's ever easy. Nothing worth doing is ever easy. So and the more moving parts you have, the more likely it's going to break down. So you just make it work.
It's true.
So yeah, we get into Ramadi, 2004. So you talk to anyone. It was right before Bush's re-election. Ramadi was a pretty sketchy place back then. Fallujah got all the headlines, but Ramadi was just as bad. So I was there for 3 months, working various stuff. I did like base security, working on one of the gates. I spent most of the time on an observation post, working the graveyard shift next to the burn pit, sucking down fumes of burning trash, staring off into nothing in the middle of the night. Had a couple close calls with mortars and RPGs and the bad sniper. There was 2 snipers in Ramadi at the time. One was good, one was bad. I got shot at by the bad one.
So one was accurate and one was inaccurate? Is that what that means?
Yeah.
Thankfully, you got... they were inaccurate on both times.
Yeah. I mean, there was an instance where, like, I'm standing here and my NCO's standing here and the bullet right between our heads. So, I don't know who he was aiming at, but he missed.
Yeah.
But that was interesting. You know, and there's a couple times where I'd walk in one of the buildings and mortar would land outside right when I walked in. Like if I had gone to the porta potties before that or something, you know, it might have been a different story.
I think you said that they were doing it from moving vehicles, or they were pulling in a truck and fire, and that way you couldn't even track where it was coming from because they'd fire and then they'd be gone. You know, and so it's like there's nothing you can do against that. You know, quickly enough.
Except the guys that got me. They got it. They got it in the end. I was in a heavy artillery unit, so we had paladins, which are like tanks on steroids. They can't fire on the run; they'd come off their tracks. Like they're long range, and so they were set up around the base, and we did counterfires. So if we could figure out where the mortars would come from, we'd lob a couple rounds. And so the guys that lobbed the rounds the day that I got hurt, we ended up getting them. So at least
that's good.
Yeah. And you're underplaying hurt, by the way, by saying just hurt.
Yeah. So November 1st, 2004, we're walking to the dining facility, which is in the middle of the base. There's a handful of us. I turn around to say something to someone, and an explosion goes off to my left, behind me, sort of. I never saw it. It turns out a mortar had landed about 20 feet away. A piece of shrapnel hit me in the abdomen and severed my iliac artery, which, those of you that don't know anatomy, it's the one that leads to your leg. So you always see in the movies or whatever, you know, you hit your femoral artery, you're as good as dead. I hit the same thing but higher up. So they picked me up and carried me to the aid station, which was like right where we were. So put me on the table and did what they had to do. Long story short, I received 32 units of blood, which I looked up later. The average human has about 14 units of blood in them. So I bled out twice over. Was resuscitated twice. Woke up a week later in Washington, D.C. And then I was in a hospital for a total of 2 months. A number of things. I tore my intestines, so I had to recover from that. I developed compartment syndrome when they reattached my artery, so blood was going to my leg but wasn't coming back. So they did a fasciotomy where they cut you from knee to ankle on both sides, and my leg was swollen. I could see my calf muscles and everything. It was gnarly. So they had to wait for the swelling to go down before they could stitch it up, and then even then I had to get like a skin graft. And to this day, my right leg is still more swollen than my left leg. But so I woke up right after the re-election, and we knew this was going to happen because they were going to do the same thing in Ramadi, but it was right after the election. Everyone went through Fallujah and Ramadi and cleaned house, and it couldn't happen before because that's the worst thing for Bush to get reelected is all that stuff. So they needed hospital beds at Walter Reed, where I was. So I was like, well, we're from Houston. You guys want to send us to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio? I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah, so they sent us there. So my mom could actually go home and then come back and visit me from, when she could. So, get out of the hospital, and then you get put into a medical holding company where you are recovering to go back to your unit, or you're recovering and out processing due to medically discharged. So you go to a board or a doctor, and he kind of decides what they're going to do with you. And so did that. He decided that they were going to medically discharge me at the time, because I had surgery to get all the shrapnel out of me. I mean, from sternum almost to groin, they cut me open and to dig all that stuff out. So at the time, I wasn't able to I couldn't stand up straight, much less lay down in the prone position, which you need to be able to fire a rifle.
Right.
So that was the reasoning that you're medically discharged, because you can't do that. You're ineffective. I mean, there's other stuff too, but that was the definitive.
Sure.
So then what you do is, it's a pretty long process to get medically discharged. It's I think it was almost 8 months.
Jeez.
Which is gnarly, because it's just you're done. Here's your paperwork. Bye. But it took them 8 months to figure that out. Again, at home military,
Most governments are that way too. Even local governments.
Yeah,
right?
no, I know.
Antiquated systems, bureaucracy, piles of paper.
Don't even get me started on the VA system.
Even just the health department here, good God.
Yeah.
But they can call you 400 times a day.
That's true.
Oh yeah, and it's when they're ready, you better be ready.
Right.
But so while I was waiting to get medically discharged, they give you bullshit jobs here and there. I think I ended up driving a van, driving patients to appointments, picking the family up from the airport, dropping people off at the airport, whatever. And so there's a group of us that would do that, rotate shifts. And one of the guys was getting out, and he lived in California or something, but he was living off base, and he had this Brinkman vertical smoker that he wasn't going to take with him. So he's like, well, I mean, you keep going home every other weekend. You just want this thing? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I brought it home. If I cook on it, I cook on it. If I don't, I don't. Whatever. It's free. So I brought it home, and then, by the time I eventually got out, I started playing around with barbecue and making some not very good barbecue. But that's what started the whole.
As
barbecue.
most pitmasters when they begin. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I look back at some of the stuff I did in the beginning. But you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably like golf in the fact that you can play 17 horrible holes. One good hole makes you think you want to go back and play golf again.
Oh, right? Yeah.
One good brisket, and you're like, I can do this. I can figure this out.
Yeah. Absolutely. But
Because I think if we're talking time frame wise, that's before kind of craft barbecue was.
yeah, it's 2005.
Yeah, and before there was so much YouTube knowledge and books and the Bible.
Easy accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm telling you, I think the first brisket I did was a recipe I pulled off of the Food Network from Emeril Lagasse.
Whoa.
And it had herbs in the rub, and it was wrapped in foil the entire time, and I didn't know any better.
Not the best resource, but maybe all you had. Hey, look, he was a credible name, though.
And we thought it was great.
Yeah. More importantly, you thought
again,
it was good.
before this whole craft barbecue thing, so we didn't know any better. But the barbecue bug really hit me when I was in culinary school in Austin. I remember I checked out Peace, Love, and Barbecue from Mike and Amy Mills from the school library, and I never returned it.
We still have it.
We still
Hey, we can cut that part out if you want.
No, it was a Port on Blue school.
Yeah, right. They can't come and get you for the money.
They got
anymore.
their money.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter because they closed.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, we started eating around. We're in Austin, so, I live 5 minutes from Rudy's, and people can say what they want about Rudy's, but Rudy's was really good back in the day. It's still as good, but it's not. I have a whole thing about Rudy's. It's not old enough to be a traditional place,
Gotcha.
but it's still a chain, so people don't respect it.
Right.
They put out quality barbecue.
It's consistent.
It is consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's consistently good.
Yeah.
Maybe not consistently great. I don't know, I haven't been in a while, but like compared to Franklin or whatever, obviously he's the king,
Yeah.
But before Aaron Franklin, there was a bunch of Rudy's popping
Yeah.
up everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was the best place to get barbecue where I lived. But we would also go out to like Lockhart and Luling and like Cooper's. So there was that other stuff too. But 5 minutes from a Rudy's, and that's when I discovered cream corn. And now everyone does cream corn.
That's right.
Like Black's and Rudy's were the first 2 places I ever had cream corn at. But we did a competition at the school, a barbecue competition at the school. Did that same stupid Enroligasi brisket. Hey, but we got 3rd place.
See?
Yeah.
Somebody likes it.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there was culinary students that were searing off their brisket. No one knew what they were doing. But we had fun.
Yeah.
We drank a lot of beer. Yeah, so this was 2006, which I think was still before Aaron started. What did he start, like 2007, 2008?
Somewhere right in there. It's real
Yeah,
close.
it was like, he might have just started that trailer,
I think he was putting herbs on his brisket though in the beginning too. He just didn't tell anyone. But
Right, yeah.
you gotta start somewhere,
That didn't
right?
make
You gotta
into the
start
book.
somewhere.
You gotta start
Right.
somewhere.
Doesn't make
right?
it in the book, yeah. But yeah, so I came home from school and got a job working at a now recently closed Pan Asian sushi restaurant in
It can be named.
Yeah.
Kona Grill. I got
There you
a
go.
Kona
You
Grill in
can say it.
Sugarland,
It's okay.
which closed in Sugarland years ago, but they've closed all of them like as of last week. But I kept barbecuing on the side at home on my days off. And then it just kind of manifested itself from there.
Yeah.
And by the time I ended up I worked at a couple places, Brennan's. By the time I was working at Underbelly, I was far enough along in this obsession that I got a trailer, barbecue pit trailer, and started doing. And Chris Shepard told me to stop talking about it and be about it enough times to finally just start doing pop-ups. And then just kind of grew from there. And this was 2012.
It's interesting that his name popped up, and here's why. So we've had seven guests on the show, right? All barbecue primarily, and I'd say half of those guests have all mentioned Chris Shepard's name, in the fact that he's been either a motivating factor or a kick in the ass factor.
Oh yeah.
From a verbal standpoint, or a hey, listen, you guys should do this, or you should try, or you should check it out. I did not know that he gave you those words of encouragement as well. But I mean,
He's been somebody that industry guys have leaned on.
He's the godfather.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, he's just tired of hearing me talk about it. Dude, do something or shut up. Like,
Right.
Well,
fair enough.
the young Patrick.
Patrick worked for Chris when Ronnie was opening the barbecue restaurant, and Ronnie approached Patrick, and I remember Patrick talked to Chris about it. Like, I'm struggling with whether or not I should take this
Yeah.
job, and Chris was like, "You'd be stupid not to,"
Yeah.
which meant he was losing, one of his veteran employees.
Right.
And so that's just who he is.
That's a great leader. Well, we talk about this often, and I don't think it gets recognized enough, right? So there are good people in the industry, there's really bad people in the industry, and then there's leaders that aren't afraid to let people grow.
Yeah.
Right? And Chris sounds like one of those guys who encourages folks to say, hey, look, you're going to be great with or without me. Now's your time to go.
Yeah. Kick him up in this.
That's really cool, though. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have enough of that, I think, on the restaurant side, because we talk about that, and you know the difference between the restaurant and the barbecue industry. One's a family and one's a bunch of backstabbers for the most part. You can sort of classify them. But to hear that about Chris, this
Yeah.
is the
Refreshing
third or
as
fourth
hell.
time, right? To hear that now you've dubbed him the Godfather, which I didn't know either.
We used to
But
call him that in the kitchen. The godfather.
but still, it's really cool. It's really
Yeah.
cool to hear that.
Yeah, I mean that's his premise. One of the things he championed at Underbelly was showing off what you could find around the city. Like, yeah, you came in here at my restaurant. That's great. Here's a list of places you should go eat next.
Right. Yeah.
And it's all mom and pop places.
Yeah.
People that he supports and thinks is doing great food and good people. And so we have people that come through our line now. Like, Chris Shepard sent us over here. Oh, awesome. Oh,
Who's that?
Chris, who?
Yeah, Chris. Who's that guy? Did he send you his money?
Yeah.
We have a baby now.
Yeah. But that's what he does. Is
Yeah.
He talks about people coming to town. They eat at his restaurant. You know, he's not going to feed them the 3-4 days they're here every day. So like, go eat at these places. I know these places are great and they're good people. And so he's a godfather.
Yeah, that's cool.
I do want to deep dive into that a little bit more because we're about to get to a cross path between the two of y'all.
Yeah.
So it'd be great to kind of talk about both y'all's culinary careers before crossing paths. We're gonna do a quick word from our sponsor, Duke's Premium Meats, and then we'll be right back with part 2.
Nobody beats Duke's Meats.
Duke's Premium Meats Home Delivery is your one-stop shop for premium quality meats delivered right to your doorstep. Delivering all over the United States, Duke's Premium Meats offers you the best in quality by personally working closely with local ranchers and butchers. Duke's Premium Meats offers everything from fillets and lobster tails to heart-shaped ribeyes to Texas-raised Wagyu brisket. Get amazing meat delivered right to your door by using Duke's Premium Meats. Visit their site at www.dukespremiummeats.com.
Hey, welcome back to part 2 of Cost of Goods Told. I am Darren Lafferty, joined by producer, chef Connor, and our guests today are Patrick and Aaron Feges. Man, I really worked hard at that.
I know.
And he smiled when I said it.
That's
so
why
that's
I'm
all
having you.
good.
That's why I'm having you bring it back in because I know I'm going to screw it up. So.
I've only had to deal with it my whole life.
Right. It could have been worse, right? We could have called it Feges. But anyway, welcome back, and thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
We've kind of run through with Patrick a little bit about his military background, and because your wife's here too, we want to talk about the dynamic duo and talk about a little bit about Aaron, your background, where you're from, Houston, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because you went to some high school I'm not supposed to. but anyway, tell us a little bit about you.
Gosh, I mean, I'm not as interesting as Patrick. It's hard to follow that.
Pay me Dos Equis.
I grew up in Houston and went to college at Texas Tech, studied biology, and
Is it Go Red Raiders?
Go
Right?
Red
Guns
Raiders.
up.
And I was pretty hell-bent on doing something medical. Originally I wanted to be a doctor, and then I decided I was going to be a dentist, which seems really random now. But it was just an easier way to be a doctor.
So you weren't lazy, but you were very efficient. You knew what you wanted to go
realistic.
home. Okay.
And then I studied abroad, and I really started liking cooking when I was in college. That's the great thing about roommates. You have people to cook for, and like Sunday nights we would get together and do like a family meal with all of our roommates and then all of our friends. And not that any of it was any good, but it was fun. It was fun, and I really enjoyed it. And then I studied abroad in Spain, and I came back from living in Spain for a few months, and I decided these cultures that are built around food are pretty fantastic, and this idea that like food really brings people together is pretty fantastic, and I really just felt warm and fuzzy being there. And how can I continue to like live this life? And I convinced myself that if I pursued a career in culinary, that I would get to travel the world, and maybe I'd even live in Spain again. That has never happened, but it got me to culinary school, which was a really huge disappointment to my parents when I called them and said, I know I'm about to take the DAT, which is the really expensive dental exam, and I'd been taking all these expensive courses to train me to take the dental exam. And I called my parents and I was like, instead of doing that, I think I'm going to go to culinary school. And I think my dad just Googled like average income of a chef and immediately like responded, not with no, because that's not how he is, just like, have you looked into it? Let's talk to some culinary schools, because I'd already said like, I want to go to culinary school instead. And we had meetings with Lenote here in Houston, and then I even went and had a meeting with the school that I eventually went to in San Francisco, and the answers were all very gloomy. It was, what does the average student make their first year out of culinary school? And I think the answer at Lenote was $22,000 or something.
Right.
How many students get placed in a job? The answer was really low too. I mean, it was just like, I think my dad just continued to be like, this is great, she's gonna totally change her mind. But I left the meeting and I remember just looking at him and going, he's like, so what do you think? And I looked at him and I said, I think they were talking about the average student. And he goes, what does that mean? And I go, well, I don't plan on being the average student.
Nice.
And
You see that bell curve? I'm
Yeah.
all the way
I
past
set
that.
the curve.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's true. I was at the top of my class when I graduated from culinary school, mostly because I just received a biology degree. And culinary school is more about biology and chemistry. You know,
Yeah.
the first class you do, they draw a pH scale on, the whiteboard. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be
I'm gonna ace
easy.
this.
I don't know how to cook, but I literally was the top student in my class. I'd never had a job in a restaurant. And most of the people in our classes had been cooking. Culinary school was, the next step towards a culinary career.
Yeah,
And for
yeah,
me,
yeah.
it was the first step. So everything was really backwards, but somehow academically I came out on top. And because of that, I was able to get an internship at Per Se, which was like a really sought after internship. But I think their criteria really fell with, where did you fall in your class
academic
ranking?
side, yeah.
Because that was where you fell in your class ranking. And then could you get a recommendation? Like, were you highly recommended? And of course the schools would highly recommend you if you were at the top. Now that was the first kitchen I ever worked in, was Per Se. And I was unpaid, so I don't know if you could say I worked there, but like
Sweat labor. Sweat.
I was in those doors for 16 hours a day producing things that they told me to produce. And the only reason that was an opportunity for me was because of, how I did in culinary school. And I never moved back to San Francisco. I remember I moved to New York to do this internship, and I lived on my sister's couch. She lived in New York. And I had this one suitcase, and I just kept telling Per Se, like when my internship was done, I was like, can I just keep working here? And they were like, yeah, we don't pay you, so yeah.
Right.
And so I stayed for a few months, worked there. Like eventually I got,
Minimum
they
wage.
embraced me. They brought me into the fold. But
For listeners who may not know what Per Se is, do you mind explaining just a little bit so listeners know the echelon that you're talking about as far as restaurants go?
Yeah, so Per Se is, so Thomas Keller is, I think, one of the, and probably most people would agree, one of the most well-known and respected chefs in America. And for a long time in the early 2000s, he had two of the best restaurants in America, and the first one being the French Laundry, which is in Napa, and then Per Se, which is the equivalent of the French Laundry in New York. They even modeled this famous blue front door, because it's in a shopping center, so to give it the look of French Laundry, they had this door that was famous, and it's one of the hardest kitchens. I think now there's more kitchens like this. El Bulli used to be one. So some of the, if you look at the top 10 restaurants in the world, they're run in a similar manner. There's a lot of free labor that makes those places operate, and but the reason that people are willing to work for free is because you gain so much experience and knowledge, and just being able to stand shoulder to shoulder with these chefs, you benefit from that immensely. So there's, you get paid, you just don't get paid money.
And the credentials that get to take with you, right?
Yes.
You can
Build
talk
up your
about.
resume.
Yeah.
Well, big time, you build up your resume, but you really work. You work hard for it. And I remember the first 2 weeks I was there, like I said, I'd never worked in a restaurant before. I was like, hopefully unprepared for the labor side, the physical side. I just did not think I could keep up. And I remember the first 2 weeks I was there, I'd come home from like a 16-hour shift, and my ankles were super swollen. And I'd prop them up on a pillow on the couch where I was sleeping, and
On your bed.
Oh yeah, on my bed, which was like actually a really cheap futon back when people had futons.
Those in style.
Yeah.
Futons are big.
And I'd ice them down, and I'd fall asleep like that, and I'd sleep for 4 hours, and then I'd wake up with melted ice spilled everywhere, and I'd put my shoes back on and go back to work. And I didn't think I could do it. I remember just being like, this is, like, I'm in over my head. I shouldn't have thought I could do this. And I remember calling my dad, and he was like, well, how's it going? And I'm like, it's awful. Like, I don't like this. This is terrible. And he was like, well, your internship's only 3 months, and there's nothing that you can't do for 3 months, no matter how miserable you are. And I just remember thinking, like, yeah, he's right. Like, I can do it. And after 2 weeks, I physically got used to it. Like, my body stopped hurting. I started to get the hang of it, and people started really embracing me, and like I wasn't messing everything up. I was starting to do things right, and I became like addicted to it. I'd get there an hour early, even though it was like a 16-hour unpaid day, and at the end of the shift, they would let the interns go, but the team would stay and they'd work on their menu for the next day, which was, you know, the menu always changed day to day. The menu changed. They did that at the end of their shift after everything was cleaned, and they would, you know, so they'd say, okay, interns can go. Most interns would leave and I would stay. I literally became addicted to the feeling of like I was accomplishing this thing that was so hard, and this kitchen surrounded by these really brilliant people. And then Thomas Keller was there from time to time because they were doing the Under Pressure cookbook, which at the time was like nobody knew what vacuum sealing was, and nobody knew what sous vide. Nobody knew how to say sous vide.
Right.
And you know,
exactly.
and so it was just this really great. I mean, it was the best thing I ever did in my career. And then after that, I stayed in New York. I never moved back to Houston or to San Francisco. I think I flew back once, boxed up some of my stuff, and then shipped it to New York, only to realize that I didn't have room for any of it. And so it just like went to the street. It stayed in a box and just got put on the street. And we kicked my sister's roommate out so that I could take the room. I made it official.
So when you started to embrace showing up an hour early, they embraced you. I know your body got adjusted to standing on your feet. I mean, I've done that, and that's why I don't do it now, because I got to live it for a week, and I'm like, nope, I'm good. But you think you were competing with the kitchen, or do you think you were competing with yourself?
Oh, I was 100% competing with myself. Those first 2 weeks, I think I wasn't enjoying it because I didn't think I could do it.
Yeah.
And then once I figured out that I could do it, it became a competition to see how much more could I do.
Yeah.
And really the other people in the kitchen started, like, I hate to say the word jiving, but like you just start to get in a rhythm with other people. And for me to be able to get into a rhythm with these other people was huge, because I was in awe of everybody there. The talent pool that's in that kitchen is amazing, and there's people from around the world. And at first they're just giving you tasks and you're messing it up, you know. They're giving you something to do and then they're having to do it, you know, anyways, because you messed it up. And then eventually they're giving you stuff to do because they know you can do it.
Yeah.
And so it started to become this thing where I'd get partnered with somebody, but then the other cooks would say like, hey, can you do this? Because like my intern's not doing it right. And it just felt really good. I felt like I was really thriving. And I remember there was this one moment, the PDR chef, his name was Rory Herman, whose dad was the actor something Herman from The Lost Boys. He played the head vampire.
I have to look that up.
Yeah, and he played in Gilmore Girls. Well,
the main vampire in Lost Boys, right?
Well, so Rory Herman was the chef of the private dining room, and a lot of times that's who I would work with. Yeah, the PDR.
Okay. I got you.
So I would work with the lingo, right? I would work with the PDR. And one day he kind of yelled at me, which was so uncharacteristic. He yelled at me about something and said, go to the dry storage and, you know, like reorganize the onions. And I just remember being like, this is so out of character. And I walked into the dry storage and they had set out like a 5-course meal. And I just like looked at him in shock, like, what's going on? I'm not in on the joke. And he was like, it's for you. We just wanted to we wanted to do this because you've been working so hard.
That's cool.
And I got to eat a per se meal
Very
that
nice.
They paid staff members had like set this up. And I just thought like I'll never forget that. That was pretty amazing.
That's not something that a establishment like that does lightly either. I mean, this is an establishment where it's almost like one chef per every 2 guests, you know, type of kitchen where their resumes are stacked this big. And so for you to come out and for this to be your first experience in a kitchen is insane. For you to be like, oh, I really like that. You know, it'd be different if you were like, oh, I worked at my grandpa's and he was super nice to me and, you know, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But to earn your freaking kitchen chops and your kitchen hands and, you know, that sort of thing at per se. I hope that comes across to listeners, because I know that we've got some great establishments here in Houston, but I don't know if we have an establishment that is quite like that, or if we ever will, or if those establishments are still viable outside of maybe a New York or, you know, a California type of thing.
I mean, per se is constantly on the world's top 50 best restaurant list.
But I think you bring up a good point. I don't know that you could have a per se here.
Right.
And I don't know that a per se, I mean, I think even per se struggles to be per se now. Like, I don't know because I don't work there, but is it the same as it was 10 years ago? I don't know. But it struggles to be that.
Right.
because we've all changed and how we eat has changed.
Yeah, generationally, I mean, just how we sit down and eat now, that whole white tablecloth type of thing is kind of going by the wayside. I mean, I think the biggest example is how steakhouses have changed here in Houston. You've seen a dynamic shift from that. Or if you look at like Pass and Provisions or something, or an establishment like that, where the servers are dressed how I would dress,
Or years back, if you showed up in something less than suit and tie,
right,
you'd be the couple or the person by the kitchen door.
Yeah.
They had that one table.
Or they'd have jackets for you.
That's
I remember having to wear a jacket that came here because Dad took me out.
Now they don't advertise it, but they're going to let you in.
Yeah.
Your money's as green as everyone else's, and it pays the bills too.
Put you at the bar.
Put you at the bar.
I mean, it happened a couple of times when I was working at Brennan's. Some people would walk in and they still say, jacket.
Yeah.
You can maybe get away with a jacket, dress shirt, But basketball All-Star game was in town, and so some people would come in like shorts. Here's our courtyard and bar. We'll feed you.
You're welcome to hang out there.
To eat in the dining room, you got to be dressed up. But we'll put you in the bar, no problem.
We do go for special occasions, and my brother always is quick to remind me you need to bring a jacket.
Yeah. You can get away without a jacket, but you got to be dressed. I've never worn a jacket there.
No. Well,
you got to be
Brennan's?
dressed. Yeah.
But you know everybody there.
But you've
They're
earned
not
the
gonna
right.
Yeah, you worked there.
I'm still slacks tucked in dress shirt though.
Yeah.
That's as fancy as Patrick gets, by the way.
Hey, you just described me as well. Once I left corporate America, I was like, I own golf shirts, 2 button downs, and a pair of slacks.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how long was the stint at Per Se again? I'm sorry.
So the actual internship was 3 months.
Right. But you extended it.
I stayed for about 7 months.
Okay. Awesome. And then what was it after that?
So while I was at Per Se, the chef de cuisine, his name was Jonathan Benno, and his fiance at the time was also in the culinary world. And I remember he kind of said, eventually, this is not where you should base all of your ideas of this industry on, because this is this amazing, like everybody was so respectful and everything was so clean and everything was done in such a really organized and regimented way. And he said, this is just not really realistic for what you might experience when you get out. And so he really encouraged me to kind of step out and get more experiences. But I didn't know anybody else in New York, and I was working, 16 hours a day at Per Se, so I really did live in this bubble. I was like, I don't even go out to eat. I don't make any money. I live on my sister's couch still. So he introduced me to his fiance, and her name was Elizabeth Chapman, but they're now married. And she'd kind of come up through the Mario Batali side. Mm-hmm. And so I started working for her at a place called Italian Wine Merchants that was owned by Mario and Joe Bastianich. And then eventually I was there for a few months, and then I met Mario, and he encouraged me to go work at Babbo. And Babbo and Italian Wine or Babbo and Per Se were like huge contradictions. The cooking style at Babbo is very passionate, and there aren't a lot of rules. It's like they don't give you a recipe when they're training you how to do the dishes. It's just like you add acid, you add vinegar. Oh, how much?
Yeah. We'll
add some and taste it. They look at you like you're crazy if you ask how much, but everything at Per Se was a very precise recipe, done to the gram, and Babbo was all about learning to cook. And so having those two experiences, I think is great, because it produced what I think, I think I'm a pretty well-rounded chef. Like I know what it means to be regimented. I know what it means to respect the kitchen and to be clean and to work with a lot of discipline, but I also know what it means to cook with passion and, to cook with taste and to use your senses and not just follow a recipe so that you don't have to use those things. And so it was this really great dichotomy, but, and it was, I really learned a lot from both. And I think Babbo was a really great experience. In light of everything that's come out, Babbo, those things totally existed back in the day, and it kind of placed this darkness. There was just a lot of bullying that went on, and so we all got along really well. All the cooks did, and we got along really well with the front of house, and everybody hung out. But there was always this person that really just came in, and his goal was to ruin your day. And so I didn't stay there forever. As soon as I felt like I learned what I came to learn and paid my dues and worked there a respectable enough amount of time that I could leave. And if somebody asked why did you only work there for a year and a half, I would have a really legitimate answer. Right. And I left, and then I actually moved back to Houston not long after that.
Okay, yeah, because I think what you're talking about is kind of like that French style of coming in, and I mean, getting grabbed by the throat and pushed up against the wall, or a pan thrown at you type of thing, and. That did exist here in the U.S., and I know that it's one thing, I know we talked about it a little bit, to raise a voice at somebody or to, be short with somebody. It's another to put hands on somebody or to, come in with the intent of being a bully or,
Yeah.
And that was a huge part of both New York and California, and sometimes here in Houston when you'd have, different people. So, but I also think that it's really cool that you talked about, because I was super excited to see where you went to next, because I was like, oh man, it had to have been like a rude awakening or something, it's stage 2 from.
It's like your first car being like a Bentley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get in a Chevrolet
and then you
Impala.
gotta you gotta drive the S10. And
Yeah.
like, ooh.
And it's kind of like you want to have both, because you need to know. Like, you want to know how to drive the nice car, but you need to drive the bad car to appreciate the nice car.
You're like, but doesn't everybody do this? It just comes with navigation,
Yeah, exactly.
So what was it in Houston that brought you back to Houston?
Well, I just all of a sudden got homesick. I thought I was a New Yorker for life. I would brag to people, like, I'm here forever. And then, every winter I'd start to question that because of the cold weather. So, like, January, February, I'd be like, well, maybe I'm not a New Yorker. And then it'd get nice again, and I'd be like, no, I'm here for a life. And I remember my 4th January, February there, I just left Babo, and I was kind of like in this interim. I didn't know what my next step was going to be. And I was kind of questioning, like, what do you do with this career if you don't want to just be in a cutthroat kitchen? And I didn't know that there were a lot of other options. It didn't seem like there were. And I moved back to Houston not even knowing, like, what I was going to do. Just I moved back. I was working at Williams-Sonoma as a culinary expert. And this was as they were launching sous vide, like the circulators they were taking commercial equipment and trying to market it to the household.
Right.
And I was part of the team working with other celebrity chefs. I was not a celebrity chef, but I was working with celebrity chefs, people that, won Top Chef and that were paid a lot more money from Williams-Sonoma to, like, help launch these products. But I was working in the stores to help push them into the market.
Gotcha.
So it was a really fun, really cool job. And I got to work with Thomas Keller again because he was developing a line of all-clad that was exclusive to Williams-Sonoma. And I moved back to Houston with that job, and then as soon as I moved here, I met somebody named Scott Miller in a Williams-Sonoma who was returning a product, and he kind of argued with me for a minute. It broke down, and I said, well, he explained what his use was of it, and I said, this is really not meant for commercial use, so you'll continue to have this problem. And he kind of questioned, he's like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, well, I'm a chef. Well, he looked at this Williams-Sonoma badge. It was just like, chef. And so I called his bluff and kind of spilled off my resume, which seems really arrogant now that I'm thinking about it. But
the chef
and then he offered me a job. And so I went, and he was the owner at Plonk, and I went and worked at Plonk. I became the executive chef of a small wine bar and bistro in Garden Oaks. There was nothing else around there, and now it's like a thriving little neighborhood full of restaurants. But at the time, it was just Plonk, and I was there for 2.5 years, and that was really my introduction into Houston's culinary scene. And Plonk was a real new, up-and-coming restaurant, and we kind of grew together, the restaurant and me, and the industry here was much more welcoming than New York's industry. There are a lot of people, a lot of chefs that would just reach out, and social media was new, and social media really, helps connect, I think, all of us in the industry. That's how we knew you on social media before we knew you, and
vice versa.
Yeah, so I think that was like my transition into Houston.
Well, that's a huge step to take from, being kind of the commis, and two establishments, then Williams-Sonoma, and then it's like, hey, look, now you have to lead a team, and you have to learn that while we're learning, because any new establishment has to change and develop as the customers kind of demand that change.
Yeah.
Did you also start to get your sommelier's license at that time, or or is that just something that naturally came?
So I've always been interested in wine, and when I worked at Babbo,
Okay.
I thought about doing an internship that the Bastianich family offered at their vineyards in Italy, but it always coincided with when the busy season started in the
Right.
restaurant, so it was going to be like a giant leap if I was going to be able to do it.
There's a big reason why I'm asking that, and we'll get to that in part
Yeah.
3, but because of that background, there's a specific question that I want to ask in part 3, if you can stick around
Yeah.
for just 5 minutes, because
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
anxious to talk to you about this.
So I was interested in wine for a long time, and I started studying wine, like on my own, just reading my own books and really getting into it early on. For about 10 years, I just did things on my own. After I left the hotel, which is somewhere I worked here in Houston, I got a job at Camerata. I never took any tests because it is chef code that you do not take a paid exam to prove that you are a level. I felt like that to my core. Like, I'm not going to spend $500 to take your level 1 test just to prove to myself that I know what I know. So I'm completely uncertified. I have, in fact, forgotten most of my knowledge. But while I was at Camerata, I mean, I was invested 150% in trying to fake it till I make it,
Right.
I read all these books and was regurgitating this information and, learning all the fun wines. In fact, we're having a wine party tomorrow night. Patrick doesn't know all about it yet. Where we're like, I have all these really great, cool wines that have been aging unintentionally because I got pregnant. And Patrick's not into wine, so it's like, I want to open these bottles with people that appreciate them. So we're inviting our friends that are starting Alta Marfa out in
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so they're coming over, and and Chris, who's the GM at Camerata, and we're gonna open these cool rare wines that I have had for 3 years that are meant to be drunk young, but I just have been sitting on them because I didn't have anybody to drink them with.
From dentist, right?
Right.
Well, supposedly dentist, to you figured out how to be a chef, which was just something you just said, which was really funny though, is that I'm not about to take a test to prove to you. To confident, cocky, chef-driven, which is really cool. It's a great story.
Both stories have been
Absolutely.
awesome. So I think that's a good spot to stop or to end part 2.
Yeah.
Part 3, we're definitely going to deep dive, and I'm going to ask that question that I've been super anxious to ask about because it's something that's been on my mind for a while. So quick word from our sponsor, Duke. Duke's Premium Meats Home Delivery is your one-stop shop for premium quality meats delivered right to your doorstep. Delivering all over the United States, Duke's Premium Meats offers you the best in quality by personally working closely with local ranchers and butchers. Duke's Premium Meats offers everything from fillets and lobster tails to heart-shaped ribeyes to Texas-raised Wagyu brisket. Get amazing meat delivered right to your door by using Duke's Premium Meats. Visit their site at www.dukespremiummeats.com.
I don't know if you lost your voice. Like,
No, go ahead.
go ahead.
That's there then for sure.
Hey, welcome back to part 3 of Cost of Goods Told. If you haven't heard 1 and 2, you've missed out because Connor and I are here with Patrick and Aaron Feges of Feges BBQ here in Greenway Plaza. We've talked to Patrick about his sort of past and how he's come into barbecue in his own, and now part 2 is with Aaron and how she's a little Southern belle who wanted to be a dentist and then decided to work 16 hours a day because there was nothing better to do. So part 3, I'm assuming we're going to talk to both of you about how you met, the slow empire you're building, not just in your home but also in your business, and all the good things to come. So welcome back to part 3, and thank you again for spending time with us.
Anytime.
We appreciate it. Anytime. See, we got
Anytime.
that. We got that.
Got it on record.
So, Connor, you've been alluding to a burning question in your mind.
It's a burning question for me, simply because I got into wine and so forth, and I can kind of somewhat talk educationally about it. Mm-hmm. My palate is not fantastic, just in general. For this whole journey into barbecue and so forth, it has been hard for me to describe distinctions between barbecue. I mean, I could say, obviously, Ara's barbecue is completely different than Blood Brothers barbecue, which is completely different from y'all's barbecue. But even reading Texas Monthly or Houston write-ups or anything like that, it's been hard to find key descriptors like you would use for, let's say, a bottle of wine. Like if I say it's full-bodied, that instantly puts into somebody's head what it means. Same thing with, this has dark berry tones, or, this has an earth element, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Tobacco, yada, yada, yada. I know, right? I'm trying to get invited to that wine night. So.
You should come over tomorrow night.
Right, take it. It's on record too. So if you don't mind, because you've got an extensive culinary background, and then you meet Patrick, and he's built up through pop-ups and through meeting or through working through the culinary world as well, a style of barbecue that I think kind of jointly comes together with your establishment, with your restaurant. I can definitely talk about the sides and so forth, but would you mind just spending just a few minutes talking about, like, if you taste someone's barbecue, what are the elements that you pull from it? Because you have to have a palate to be able to talk about wine, with extensively. I know that's a loaded question, and I apologize, but
Are all loaded baked potatoes different?
The go-to item sounds like a loaded baked potato.
So I will answer your question.
Patrick.
Hopefully this answers
Perfect.
your question. People always ask us what type of wood we use.
Okay.
And I believe that only a small fraction of the people that ask that really understand why that question would even be important. What wood do you use? Well, we use post oak. Why is that important? Because it burns a certain way, because it tastes a certain way. It's a little bit more mild than other woods.
I think people ask that question because they want to compare you.
Well,
what do you use? Post oak. Oh, that's what Aaron Franklin uses.
Yeah, but they don't know why is it important that, why did Aaron choose this, or why, there's barbecue that I love that is not cooked using the same wood we cook, that we use with. And I think that there's little nuances like that, and most people will enjoy barbecue without ever having to understand those nuances. But there's certainly this barbecue community who are really deeply invested in barbecue places, and they want to try everything, and I think they truly want to understand what those nuances are and what those subtle differences are. And I think that on, some like physiological level, you start to understand as you're eating barbecue, you may not know what kind of wood it is, but you feel like it's different than like, this tastes different than what I had last week. I wonder if it's the wood, or I wonder if it's, how long they smoke it, or what they're, I think a lot of people just in Texas use salt and pepper as like it's the base of their seasoning, but there's probably one or two other things in there. I know we have one or two other things. And it's all really simple, but is it really simple? Because there's these subtle differences, right? You're taking something where there's only maybe 4 ingredients in the rub. So if 2 of those ingredients are the same, but 2 of those ingredients are different, those 2 ingredients that are different are going to have a big impact from one barbecue joint to the next.
Right.
One of the things that really stood out when I first started dating Patrick, I didn't know anything about barbecue, and I was not really a barbecue enthusiast. I didn't grow up in a family that ate barbecue, every weekend, and so I was able to learn a lot right away just from Patrick. Patrick wasn't necessarily trying to teach me anything, but he would just talk barbecue.
Right.
And I was just learning all these new things. And I remember at the first pop-ups he would stay up overnight, and his alarm would go off every 45 minutes, and he'd put new logs on. And that's the dedication that is in barbecue, which is why I think it's such a unique thing to cook. It takes so much more work than other genres of food. But he'd come in and be all, like, I'd wake up to him like being frustrated, and I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, well, it's like the smoke's coming out white or something. And that doesn't mean anything to me. That doesn't mean anything to most people. And I'd be like, I don't understand why you're frustrated about that. And he's like, well, it's not clean. You want the smoke to be clean. There's little things like that. And this is, I think, what sets some barbecue on a different scale than everything else, is people that know and understand that there's dirty smoke, that there's a way you want to burn the wood, that there's ways that you want to set the wood set the briskets on the smoker. We have one type of pit, and there's things that Patrick says every day. He wishes that we had another pit. We're underground. We can't have a second pit, but he wishes that we had an offset because there's just things that would cook better on an offset. And I think just understanding those things and the differences, those are the nuances in barbecue. Mm-hmm. Seasoning is pretty easy to detect. I think most people can taste something. If you get a poblano sausage from Tejas, it has a very distinct taste. You can probably pick up it's a pepper. You may not immediately know it's a poblano, but like as soon as somebody says it, you're like, oh yeah, that's it. Right. But there's a lot of subtleties in barbecue, and a lot of it's the technique. It's not even in what you're consuming.
Right.
It's the technique that produced what you're consuming. And that's, I think, something that wine also shares.
Right.
Like, your wine might taste like cranberry. There's no cranberry in your wine. Right. So, like, it's the technique. It's what went into producing it's the soil type. It's the pH. It's, the climate. Did it get cold unexpectedly one night? All those things affect wine, and I think barbecue, people underestimate barbecue and think it's just a really simple thing. Mm-hmm. It's not simple. It's super complex. There's only 4 or 5 elements to barbecue, but there's about 1 million ways you can manipulate those elements to produce a different outcome. And I don't want to take credit for knowing how to manipulate those things. That is entirely on Patrick, but I have learned to respect barbecue in the way that I respect wine because it is not easy. It takes a mad scientist to really figure out their formula.
Right.
And what I like about the Houston barbecue scene is people really have their own formula. I think Truth has its formula. Blood Brothers has its formula. They're not copying each other. They're learning from each other. Yeah. But they're not copying each other. And a lot of the people that stand out, the people that you read about and are on the list, they have their formula, and they really understand those nuances.
That was perfect.
Feges barbecue as well.
Yeah, right. that was absolutely awesome. Like, I really want to take that and just
what
make
she
a clip
just
of
said
it.
better than we could have ever said.
Right.
But we have identified some of those in the past, and that's not our credit. It's just the little that we know is humidity. Are there leaks in the pit? Is it long wood? Is it short wood?
Yeah.
Is
it
hot and fast? Is it slow and low?
Yeah.
What kind of wood? I mean, those are the things that we know, like we can count on our hands. Mm-hmm. And you guys need to take your shoes off to count all the others because there's just so many variables.
Yeah. I mean, when she said, like, when people always ask you, well, what kind of wood do you use? How long do you cook it for? Like, those are the questions every pitmaster hates, right? Because, like, I cook it until it's done. Like, I can't put a timestamp on it.
Right.
And we don't set a timer.
Yeah. I use post oak, and a number of people use post oak. But everyone runs their fire differently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Aaron and Franklin and I could get the same wood from the same tree and cook it on our barbecue pits, and his is going to burn different than mine.
Right.
Yeah.
And his will probably burn better because he's just a mad genius about barbecue. But that's the thing, and so I think the subtleties, different tastes in the meats, especially the longer cooks like brisket, is you taste how that fire burned. Much less, not necessarily the wood,
right?
The species of wood. It's just how you taste how that fire burned. And if you're burping 4 hours later, you ate something where the fire wasn't burned that well. You know, if you ate something where the smoke isn't super powerful, it's very subtle. I mean, that was a more clean fire. Mm-hmm. So it's, I think that's the biggest difference as far when it comes to wood.
Yeah,
everyone wants a catch-all answer, and
it's not.
And what about the animal too, right? Depends on where you get the animal from, the age of the animal, what farm it came from,
how the animal was killed,
how it was processed and harvested. And
I mean, you have people. That's what's great about you. Look at the Texas Monthly, even like the top 10 2 years ago, or the 25 that just came out. Different wood, different cookers, different meat purveyors, and it's all in the top 10. And it's just. It's what they do with it, and there's people that might be cooking the same exact way, same meat, same wood, same style of cooker as in Aaron Franklin that didn't make the top 10. And someone else cooking completely different, because it's just all how you do it. It's great to start out with good meat. You kind of need to start out with good meat. Yeah. Properly seasoned wood in a barbecue pit that smokes, burns, that doesn't leak.
Clean. Right?
Yeah. But it's all what you put into it, too, and how you treat the fire and the meat and the smoker,
So we've talked a little bit about barbecue, which you're really focused on now. But let's go back just a little bit and tell us how, different background, how did those paths cross to the point where you're like, Yeah, man, she's cool. I mean, hey, look, she's highfalutin. She's worked in these, Frenchy foo restaurants. But how do you guys meet? How's this happen?
I don't think I knew her resume when I met her.
Otherwise, you wouldn't
Is
have
that
started
good?
dating.
outside of Plonk. Because, everyone knew her from Plonk, right? But not everyone knew. Still, not everyone knows her resume. When she drops per se on people, which she doesn't like to do, I usually do it. Oh, wow. But no, she they hired her to do the opening menu at Blacksmith,
Okay.
which I was at Underbelly at the time. Chris and Kevin and Bobby were partners at both Underbelly and Blacksmith, along with David Buer, that's his baby. So they were in the Hay Merchant Underbelly area a lot, and they were across the street, right? So, and then we would go over there to get, when they did open up, we'd go over there to get coffee before service and stuff like that. And we just kind of saw each other running around. And first time I asked her to hang out, she said yes, and then she blew me off.
Which was a lot earlier than Netflix and chill. Back then you actually had to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Get
There was no
coffee,
swipe right, swipe
We
left.
joke
type of
around.
thing.
Yeah.
We joke around. God forbid this doesn't work out. Like, we're screwed. Like, we don't know how Tinder
I am
is.
too. I'm totally screwed.
And it's like, I love to hear, talk to my cooks about Tinder because we didn't experience that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so all these crazy stories, it's just like, wow, it's completely different. We actually had to try when we were single.
Yeah. There was no I'm on the plane and I'm finding a date from where I landed in the city and I'm hooking up that night.
But
what?
I will say I did slide into her DMs because I think when we first started trying to hang out was via Twitter, right?
Something like that.
Something like
One
that.
of those platforms.
Yeah, one of
I
the
think I
social
blew
media
you off via one of those platforms.
She did. Yeah.
But that's just to see if you're really in it, to see if you're dedicated,
Made
right?
me work for it, yeah.
Well, so he brought up the smoker. So he had the Bringman, and then he decided to make it official and get an actual trailer smoker. And that smoker is what I credit with the fact that we're married and have a baby now, because I was invited to do Go Pig or Go Home, which was an event where you were given a 50-pound pig and
Whole hog.
well, it was
That was the first.
it was whole hog, but it was
It was
a
so it
50
was
pound
like a Cisco
frozen
commodity
commodity.
Oh, okay, all right.
pig.
commodity
Okay.
pig.
But then what we did is we got with Felix
Yeah.
and got a
Flores.
Michon. Yeah,
Black
Yeah.
Hill
Flores,
Meats.
Black Hill
Yep.
Meats.
Shout out
We
to
got a
Felix
Michon
Flores.
pig.
Yep.
But
Smoked that thing whole.
so this was before we ever went out.
Okay.
He'd asked me out, and I said yes, and then I blew him off. And then a few weeks later, I got invited to do this thing, and I needed a team, and I wanted my team to have a smoker. So I made sure that I invited Patrick to be on my team to be able to use his smoker. And I think that was the first time Patrick ever did whole hog. So you can thank me, Houston.
Hell yeah.
But we hung out all day. I mean, we put the pig. We didn't know what we were doing at all, and we put the pig on. At we thought we were getting it on super early at 8 a.m., but it needed to be ready by 5, and it was not. Some of it was, but not all of it.
So who's to thank for this again?
I can't believe we didn't win that.
I can't believe we didn't win that either. But we hung out all day long, and that was the first time I really got to know Patrick. And so he asked me out again that night, and there was no question as to whether or not I was going to say yes or no. I was duh, of course I'll go out with you. We've had so much fun today. But without that day, I don't know that I ever would.
Yeah.
I just didn't know. I don't know.
Let me ask you, Patrick, because maybe you're the same type of personality as I am. I'm a reserved individual unless I'm in an element that I can control or that I'm super comfortable in, where it's okay, if you catch me while I'm cooking or I'm in my restaurant or something like that, I control that. So I'm okay. You can talk to me and I'm very open and da-da-da-da. You catch me at, I don't know, a networking event, or if I have to meet someone somewhere to or a bar, hi, I can't talk. Did she just catch you in your element? You're working the whole hog. You're in your element, and that's what kind of opened you up, or?
I think we were just drinking beers.
There you go. I'll take that. I'll take that answer.
Usually when I'm working,
Liquid courage. The old liquid courage.
right. Usually when I'm working is I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, Patrick's actually not very friendly when he's in his work mode.
That explains it. That's
Yeah.
why I'm talking to Patrick at the wrong time.
Well, I think I might have said something to you at the barbecue festival because you guys were like taking video or pictures of the pig.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Getting in your way.
I'm just like, I gotta close the lid, guys. Like, oh, sorry, like, because I was running behind on those pigs
Yep.
because it was
That wind.
so cold that night. Yeah, the big
the
metal
wind,
box
too. The
with
wind
the
was a
wind.
problem. Yeah.
Man.
Well, it was funny because I mean you were talking about it with his first kind of cook or whatnot where he was getting up every 45 minutes. I swear it was the same thing that night. But then on the opposite side you had Daddy Duncan doing a whole pig, but he had a pit that his grandfather cooked on, and it was put the thing in, shut it, and then he went and slept. And I was like, I don't think Patrick slept in it, and I could see it in your face. I was like, I'm just staying out of this man's way.
I think Patrick dwells in that though.
Maybe let's
You
get
know,
him a couple
every
Jello
year-
shots.
Yeah, every
About every
year.
6 months I'll do it, and then I'm just like, oh, man, why the fuck?
So every year and every couple of months, like he'll do a real whole hog or something like an overnight cook. And he'll be really excited leading up to it, and then the next day he's like, I'm never doing that again.
Well, it's always-
And then 6 months later he's like, hey, I signed up for this thing, and I'm like, I'm not gonna remind
The
you.
weather never cooperates. That's
Yeah.
what it was. See, I had it all planned out, man. I'm gonna get that thing, flip it, get it mostly done. I'm gonna get about 3 hours of sleep. I'll be good to go. Like, no, then that wind kicked up and it was cold, and I couldn't keep that pit hot enough. I couldn't burn the wood fast enough, and then I ran out of wood, so I had to run back to the restaurant and get more wood. It was, and then the time before that, we did a whole hog in November, and it was
Oh my
below
gosh.
freezing the entire time.
The
And
fat solidified before it
Oh,
hit
no,
the
are
bottom.
you serious?
It was
That's
like
not cold.
it was, and I was up for 39 hours straight.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we were at A-Row Flint, and I couldn't. It was super windy, so I was worried about the sparks. I didn't want to start a fire anymore,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
couldn't get that fire roaring. And I just the entire pit was not up to temp at all at the same time. It was from one side to the other as I shoveled the coals because that wind was just hitting that metal.
Yeah.
And it was just, oh, man, it was. It's like that's the problem. I keep trying to do outside stuff in bad weather.
Well, we got some wonderful photos and videos, so thank you.
No, it
You
looks
know?
He hates us now.
I know, but that's okay.
Hey,
guys make me look
I got 25 new likes on it, so.
Yeah, no, you guys definitely made me look good. So and that's what's all that matters.
Can you get out of the shot? Can you throw some coals in there?
Yeah. And I had that burn barrel, and that was
That was cool.
everyone just mocked
Because
to a
they
flame.
needed it
Yeah,
to stay
we
warm.
needed it.
Some of the most likes I've gotten was off the burn barrel.
Yeah, no,
Oh, it's a
Just
great
little things
picture.
I
they're
thought.
great for
Yeah.
taking pictures. I felt bad every time I threw wood in there. I just showered everyone in sparks. But
Well, whatever event. So the event you guys, you brought him on your team because you needed a smoker. Maybe he was just smoking hot. Who really knows the truth? But it sounds like it's a little bit of both. It sounds like that's the only one you haven't won since then. Because the accolades, they stack up. There's lots of articles on you guys, and all very flattering. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You're doing something right, obviously. And then, what year was Feges Barbecue started here in Greenway Plaza? Because it's 2 years.
last year,
Like 14 months.
Okay, so not quite 2 years. Still, Texas Monthly Top 25, right? You have some really unique sides on top of some really great smoked meats that you're doing here. And it sounds like, is there anything that you guys, what's the next step? What's the next venture? Where do you want to be? I don't want to jump too far ahead if there's other things you want to talk about, but you're just doing so many things right. Is it a comfort spot to be in, or are both of you so driven that you're like, who needs sleep right now?
It is. I think it's a constant struggle for both of us because this is a really great situation here, but we both, deep down inside, really want more.
Right.
So it's that like, can we just settle down and enjoy it?
Yeah.
Like, would that be okay? Or do we have to always be pushing ourselves? And we kind of like, there's days where we look at each other and we're like, let's hold off. Like, let's just do this for a little while longer. And then like the next morning we wake up and we both look at each other and we're like, fuck that. Like,
Because the baby slept all night, you're like,
right
yeah,
now,
I
like
want
this time,
to
like
do it
this,
right now.
yeah, exactly. And it's, I think we, like, ultimately we definitely want to grow. And we're starting to kind of flirt with the idea of a second location.
well, we've had this idea of what we wanted to do for a couple years.
Patrick was peering into your
Yeah,
eyes.
I know,
like,
right? Yeah.
Are you going to say this right now?
Well, no, we had this idea of what we wanted to do for a couple years. Barbecue for lunch, a more composed place for dinner.
Sure.
Full bar, wine, cocktails, beer. And man, just a place where we can do some cool dinners with our friends around the country who do barbecue,
Yeah.
you know, and just really do whatever we want, really, you know, within the limits of our space. And we were looking for a year, and we put off starting a family to open a barbecue restaurant.
Wow.
Because once we had that kid, it was gonna be completely different, right?
Yeah.
And so this became available here at Greenway, and it wasn't what we were looking for, but it made sense. And we're all right, we'll get this open, and kind of treat this as like a proof of concept almost.
Yeah.
Get us cooking barbecue every day. Get me from cooking barbecue in my backyard.
Pretty safe, Monday through Friday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind
Monday
of
through
corporate
Friday.
hours.
Great
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah. Built-in audience.
Daycare in the building.
Take her in the
Daycare
building.
in the building.
So we did that, and then we immediately got pregnant.
Things were good.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
and you had your weekends off. Who would have thunk it?
right, yeah. But now, you know, we're a year into this. You know, Wyatt was born almost 4 months ago. So like, what's next?
Yeah.
You know, and so we're revisiting this brick and mortar that we wanted. Because
Yeah.
every day we get that question every day. Is this
Sure.
your only location?
Yeah.
Yes. For now. And then also like, well, you know, people, I'd love to come eat there, but I can't get there
Yeah.
because you're only open for lunch during the week. You know, so we need a spot where we can open on the weekends, so people, you know, barbecue fans that don't work in this general vicinity can come eat our food.
Sure.
So that, and as much as we love barbecue, it's pretty repetitive. So it gets a little monotonous. We want something where we can flex these culinary muscles a little bit,
Yep.
and do more specials, and just, you know, it's what we've been planning on doing. So
You mean cream corn just isn't exciting anymore? I mean, I don't understand. You have elotes, you have cream corn, you have the carrots.
carrots, yeah.
Well, you know, speaking about the sides and so forth, I mean, the barbecue's the barbecue, you know, and I mean, it's got its techniques and
It's
so
phenomenal,
forth.
yeah.
But I mean, when you look at the sides and so forth, y'all have staged yourselves to where if you were to say, hey, we want to do something different, I think your audience now that knows your barbecue would easily say, yeah, they're designed for that. There's something to be said about the guys who do all the hot pan, you know, type of serve, you know, where the mac and cheese is just sitting there in a vat or whatnot. But watching your team work, I mean, just the techniques that they were using, the way they were putting everything together, it was like, this is leaning more towards, you know, a real not a real kitchen, but like a different style of kitchen than what you
Yeah.
typically see in the barbecue world.
Yeah.
So I think that you've staged yourselves perfectly for it. To me, as I have a little 2-year-old, I can't imagine having this baby here in Greenway Plaza, y'all's actual baby, and then trying to throw another baby into it. But you've got two minds behind it that I couldn't think of a better team to do it, you know. So I'm rooting for y'all 110% in so many aspects, you know. I mean, just what y'all have produced, you know, and then speaking with y'all today just has me super excited. And I think I know on another podcast, you know, we talked to other establishments that have talked about Greenway Plaza not being necessarily their first choice, but working in a different way than what was planned. And I think that that's awesome. You know, I think it's brought a really cool dynamic to this space, and then allowed y'all to kind of, you know, work those chops out. So I'm super, super excited.
I think to Connor's point, you know, my opinion is, while people genuinely like the two of you, right? I mean, Aaron more than Patrick, but
yeah,
Allegedly.
he yells at the cameraman, man,
Allegedly,
you know?
that's right. But you also have a proven track record, and you both
Yeah.
have, you know, established yourselves as leader in the food industry with, you know, classically trained backgrounds, and then you jumped in together to create something really phenomenal in a community, right, where everyone lifts each other up. So not just to have the accolades, but you have a community and friends and family that believe in you, and you've also proven yourselves on your own. So congratulations for that. And
Thank you.
great things are going to come for sure. You guys know that, and we'd love to continue to be your cheerleaders, you know, and do whatever we can to help as well. So thank you for being here.
Thank
Thanks.
you guys.
That's awesome. Well, that was another episode of Cost of Goods Told. Thank you to all our listeners. Thank both of y'all for spending so much time with us. I know you got to grab the little one.
Thus, for those who don't know, who just crawled from underneath a rock, Feges BBQ is located where in Greenway Plaza? Or what's the address here?
3 Greenway.
Inside the hub.
Yeah.
Inside the hub.
It's what they call the food court. Is
How
the
do they
hub.
find you on social media? Where can they follow you? Share, like?
Feges BBQ. At Feges BBQ on all the social media.
Feges.
Feges BBQ.
Excellent.
Website is fegesbbq.
.com.
.com. We try and make it as simple as possible. There's more ways to spell barbecue than there is to cook barbecue. So,
And while we never want to kick any guests off the show, any shout outs, thank yous, appreciations, anybody you want to mention?
Thank you to Wyatt for being asleep so I could be on the podcast.
Hey, we'll take it. Good job, Wyatt.
thank you for everyone that comes in.
Yeah.
That's all your
All our
customers,
guests.
and it sounds like Chris as well, Chris Shepard.
Chris Shepard,
Yeah.
Ronnie Killen, Danny Trace. Danny Trace taught me to be a cook. Chris taught me to be a chef. Ronnie taught me how to run a barbecue restaurant.
Don't talk about it, be about it.
Don't talk about it, be about it.
Isn't that great?
That is great.
And Lyle Bento for putting up with my shit at Southern Goods. And let me
You
smoke
put
as
up with
much.
some of his.
And for letting me smoke is whatever I wanted to smoke there.
So come see Patrick and Aaron. Aaron's back to work full time now after the baby, but come see them, try their barbecue, hang out, get a plate of sides. Hey, if you don't like barbecue, come get the sides. That's on my list, literally. There's so many good sides when I come through. I'm like, how do I pick just 2? Just give me one of each. So we'll be back. So again, thank you guys for being here. We appreciate it, and
Thanks
we'll
for
see you
having
again
us.
soon.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, as always, like and subscribe. Duke's Premium Meats Home Delivery is your one-stop shop for premium quality meats delivered right to your doorstep. Delivering all over the United States, Duke's Premium Meats offers you the best in quality by personally working closely with local ranchers and butchers. Duke's Premium Meats offers everything from fillets and lobster tails to heart-shaped ribeyes to Texas-raised Wagyu brisket. Get amazing meat delivered right to your door by using Duke's Premium Meats. Visit their site at www